In 1775, Thomas Paine wrote a pamphlet stating that the freedoms of man can only be maintained by limiting the power of government. The pamphlet was called Common Sense. In 2015, it still is Common Sense.
I'm Mark Zaccaria, and this is Common Sense. Welcome back.
And I'm Elizabeth Smith. This week we learn from Don Allen about Common Core. Jeff Richard checks in, and we have a special Are You Kidding Me? But first, some analysis on top news stories. Mark?
Liz, the governor and legislative leadership are busy making a bad situation absolutely untenable. Governor Raimondo, Speaker Mattiello, and Senate President Paiva Weed announced their response to Rhode Island's position as, you guessed it, 50th out of 50 states in the quality of bridge and roadway infrastructure. The solution they propose? Why, a $100+ million per year infrastructure renovation, paid for by tolls on heavy trucks. Meanwhile, the Providence Journal reports that the combination of the state gasoline tax and the recent increases in DMV fees and surcharges currently raises well over $100 million per year. That revenue was originally slated for use solely on roadway and bridge maintenance. Too bad it has long ago been diverted to the general fund where it can be spent elsewhere. Spoiler alert, Rhode Island gas taxes increase again on July 1st, thence to be indexed to inflation. That means $184 million is expected to be generated from the former DOT maintenance taxes by 2018. Too bad none of that will go to roads and bridges. And what makes anyone think the supposedly earmarked revenue from newly proposed $700 million worth of revenue bond sales will be used any differently? Our elected leadership will proudly crow, however, that they fixed the bridges without raising taxes. Really? No. Really? When the cost of fuel goes up for truckers, the cost of the loaves of bread and the cases of soda they carry go up too. Same is true for any other added cost of doing business in this very competitive transportation sector. So make no mistake, you're going to pay for the bridges. Whether they get fixed or not, it just won't come to you as a tax bill. Look, folks, we need to fix our roads and bridges before somebody gets hurt. But we also need to fix our state government before everybody gets hurt.
Now let's check in at the State House and see what the Republican caucuses are doing this week.
Today we are releasing a preliminary report on the Rhode Island Convention Center Authority. As an overview, we looked at the Convention Center Authority because it consumes a lot of taxpayer dollars every year. Last year it was just shy of $25 million, and this year it's over $25 million, so it's going in the wrong direction. That's a lot of money for a building that when it started was sold as it was never going to cost taxpayers a dime. To date, the complex, which is the 3 buildings over there, have cost taxpayers over $450 million. And by the time the bonds are paid off, it will be over $750 million. And all that money is being spent without the taxpayers ever having approved the expenditure. The Convention Center Authority was built even before it was built. The state of Rhode Island, and Governor Sondland was the governor at the time, signed a lease agreement with the Convention Center Authority that transferred all the financial liabilities of that complex onto the shoulders of the taxpayers. Now, they're operating at 40%. What if they were operating at 60 or 70%? Just think what they could contribute to our economy.
Just a recent concert they had, I was just blown away by this. They had Neil Diamond come in. They promised him $750,000. 5,000 people showed up. In fact, I didn't even realize he was in town. We asked among ourselves, anybody know Neil? It wound up costing $179,000.
You see it in airlines. If you're not filling the seats, what are you going to do? How much does it cost you to fly that plane? If you're at 40%, I got a feeling that plane's not even going to take off.
The concern with regards to the lease agreements in the convention center specifically is that that was really how they did the end run around voter approval of debt for their subsequent projects after the initial construction.
In the summer months, which is June, July, and August, that building is virtually empty around the clock. the average number of events in the summer months for the last 3 years, is 4.5 events a month. But the salaries go on, the overhead goes on. It's over $400,000 for each of those months.
Mark, political rants can be delicious. According to Matt Fecteau and Go Local Prov, the Rhode Island Democratic Party State Committee is looking more like the Titanic. And the chairman, State Rep Joseph McNamara, is looking like Captain Edward Smith. How can the Democratic State Committee stay afloat when everyone is turning their back on anything it has to say? Let's be clear, Rhode Island is not a Democratic state, he says. Predominantly independents and unaffiliated voters make up the vast majority of the voting pool. Though Rhode Island has a history of electing Democratic legislators merely for the D next to their name. While Rhode Island has become increasingly more Democratic over the years, there's a vast disparity as far as what makes a Democrat a Democrat. Because the Rhode Island Democratic Party has a monopoly on power, we have few options, and as a result, corruption runs rampant. This upcoming special election will not include a Democratic Party State Committee endorsed candidate. Don't you see what's going on here? I feel an opportunity coming on. Psst, it's Traeger's time. Fecteau continues. How did the party devolve to this point? U.S. Representative David Cicilline has a lot to do with it. The Cicilline clan spent decades cementing and building alliances across the political spectrum in Rhode Island. With controversy after controversy, the Cicilline name is so deeply rooted in the Democratic establishment, it became a serious liability. Under the Cicilline influence, the Rhode Island Democratic Party becomes less relevant each passing day. The party can debate, endorse candidates, and pretend to fight for the middle class. But they are deluding themselves because no one is listening. A lot of credit goes to David Cicilline. If the Rhode Island Democratic State Committee is the Titanic, and Rep and Chair Mark McNamara is Captain Smith, maybe David Cicilline is the iceberg. In the end, what's the bigger tragedy? The fact that the Rhode Island Democratic State Committee doesn't realize it's irrelevant, or the fact that it thinks it still is. Unquote. Well, Matt, thank you for your insight into the Democrats' broken machine. Much like making lemonade, we here at Common Sense will take your sour grapes and make us a fine red wine. Cheers. Mark?
Liz, who do you trust? In a recent editorial in the Valley Breeze, former Rhode Island Attorney General Arlene Violet proved once again why she is among the most trustworthy residents of the beleaguered Ocean State. She did so by highlighting a simple truth. Ms. Violet asked, "Can you remember any consultant study in advance of any publicly funded construction project in our state that proved to have been even close to accurate in retrospect?" The answer was no, to no one's surprise. The Convention Center, for which it was famously promised that it would not cost taxpayers a dime, came in at a cost of around $780 million. And that was just to build it. Running the place costs you and me another $20 million or so every year. So much for that rosy estimate. Consultant group Ellerby Beckett was off on their estimate for the costs to the state to renew the Providence Civic Center. A deviation was some 31%. The explanation? Engineers doing the study forgot to account for such matters as state fire code for sprinklers and smoke detectors, and the handicapped accessibility requirements of the Americans with Disability Act, or ADA? Huh? The Narragansett Bay Commission's original estimate for annual sewage fees charged to its residential users was $165 per year. With actual charges now running at an average of $525 per year, the Commission is seeking relief for its customers by spreading their costs over all state taxpayers. Not a very novel solution to a commonly recurring problem. The Providence Place Mall was originally estimated to create $109 million per year in new tax revenue, as well as 2,400 new full-time jobs. Sadly, a 2012 study by Yale University shows that in its first 4 years of operation, the mall hasn't begun to pay back its original subsidy, much less throw off any income into the public coffers. given the current swing towards online shopping and the difficulties of using the Providence Place Mall parking lot, how do you think the curve of new tax revenue there will trend going forward? Do I even have to bring up the proposed new Pawsox Stadium in Providence? Arlene Violet's question was courteous, direct, and on point on the matter of trusting the state's political leadership when they come to us for money to pursue special projects. My question on the subject is much more pointed and harsh. How many times do you have to be robbed by elected leaders who lie to you in order to get the ball rolling and then ignore the cost overruns because they know you'll just pay for it, whatever it is? How many times that is before you get sick and tired and do something about it, about correcting the situation? Next comes Representative Patricia Morgan as she interviews Don Allen on the subject of Common Core. But first, are you kidding me?
Think Chafee! Look at me! I'm scandal-free. Oh yeah, and I'm officially running for president. On this special edition of Are You Kidding Me?, we raise the bar to what the hell just happened. Okay, I'll try to contain myself. Yes. Our beloved Link announced this week he's running for president. In an interview with CNN, he states, "Look at me, I'm scandal-free." Yes, Link, no scandals happen when you are absent. According to CNN, facing long odds and slumping in the polls, Chafee decided not to run for re-election for governor in 2014. He told CNN last month that he made the decision because he wanted to run for president. Hey, disconnect newsflash, former governor. Slumping in the polls does not point to running to president. The people are really saying, just go away. It's like you've mistaken the brake for the accelerator. Obviously, we're just getting started. He's wandered off again, and before you know it, he'll hit the trail in Grandma's bus. Stay tuned. Chafee announces, I'm running for president. What the hell just happened? Are you kidding me?
Welcome to Common Sense Rhode Island. This is a program where we try to make sense out of the policies that affect your life and come up with common sense solutions. I'm Representative Patricia Morgan, and today we have as our guest Mr. Donison Allen. He's a lifelong resident of Burrillville, a landscape contractor, and most of all for our discussion today, a very concerned parent.
Correct.
We're going to talk about Common Core today. And Mr. Allen, we've all heard that word bandied about, but a lot of us really don't understand what it is, and I know you've done extensive research. So why don't you tell us, what is Common Core?
Very good. Thank you very much for having me. What I'd like to first start by saying is that Common Core educational standards were introduced to our state back in 2009 under an agreement that was signed by our governor and the Commissioner of Education, Deborah Gist, which we agreed to adopt college and career-ready standards. We didn't know Common Core for sure at the time, but there were 4 components that we agreed to. Common Core, these state standards, there was an assessment that would be tied to those standards, and there'd also be a statewide longitudinal data system which would track all of our students' performance and a number of other attributes. And we would also be promoting charter schools.
Okay, so my understanding is the race to the top, and I think people have heard that word. We got about $65 million, is that right, in Rhode Island?
75 million
75
for
million.
race to the top, correct.
And when we accepted that money, then we accepted the responsibility of using Common Core.
Yeah, that was actually a secondary piece.
Okay.
The first piece came within the stimulus bill. So we agreed to those components under the state stabilization money that we received in 2009. So those understandings were in place before Race to the Top.
Okay, so federal dollars always have strings attached to them, and the
Yes, they
string
do.
attached was Common Core. So you said that there are standards. There are educational standards.
Yes. These standards were designed to provide a uniform platform, essentially, for what all students should know at certain grade levels. So when you look to one state to the next, the theory is that if one student leaves a district or a state, they can move to another state and pick up where they left off. So in concept, it makes sense that you may want to have a set of standards that would be seamless and be easier to track and be accountable.
So is this from preschool to 12th grade or beyond?
Well, the components of the data system that we agreed to starts at kindergarten, and they've expanded it to preschool and pre-K, and they've also expanded it through college, and they're now working with the Rhode Island Department of Labor and Training to add to workforce tracking as well.
Oh, okay, so all the way through.
Yes.
From cradle to grave kind of stuff.
Pretty much.
Or cradle to working.
Yeah.
Now, are they minimum standards? Are they what everybody needs to be doing? I mean, can you go above them? We had standards before, didn't we?
Well, we certainly did, and every state had different sets of standards. Some of them were known to be very good. Others may not be so good. But the fact that we had this new set of standards is what you said is a minimum. We are looking at essentially a minimum standards for what students should know. But what you should understand also is that when these standards were written, they were copyrighted. So nobody can make any changes to these standards once they're adopted. What you can do is add 15% more content to those standards, but you're not allowed to make changes to them once they're adopted. So it makes it very difficult for any state or district to make an effort to expand on those minimum standards.
Above them. Sure.
There's no incentive to do so because it comes back to some of the testing components and how they track. You want to make sure that you're focused only on the minimum standards as opposed to venturing off into some other areas because you're not going to be tested on those areas. So,
okay, so as I'm hearing you, there's a standard and that is tied to curriculum then. So it's not just students will be able to read complex sentences, blah, 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 by the third grade. It's actually tied to what teachers teach them, the curriculum part of it.
Yeah, there's a good quote. David Coleman, who wrote was essentially the architect of the English Language Arts Standards, had a quote in a speech in 2011 where he said that teachers will teach to the test. There is no force on earth great enough to prevent that. So in making that statement, he's essentially confirming what a lot of us believe, which is these standards will ultimately dictate curriculum. You know, whereas the federal government has no constitutional authority to have any influence or impact on education, much less curriculum or anything else, it shows you that, and indeed, this is what the ultimate effect will be.
Sure. So if you have a standard, and I'm just trying to think of one, but say that students need to understand that we breathe oxygen. So is that tied to a specific set of curriculum studies, or could a teacher be creative then and figure out different ways for kids to understand what's in the air, the different kinds of chemicals or compounds or whatever it is? I'm not very good at chemistry, so.
Yeah, I understand where you're going with that. Just to clarify a little bit with respect to the topics that are covered in Common Core, it's English Language Arts Standards and Math Standards. So your example
just English
would be,
and Math,
correct,
okay.
Right, so your example would be more of a science-based, but to take that to, say, a math example, some of the earlier math lessons that are being introduced are teaching children a certain format for studying math, which differs from how we used to do it in terms of memorization of your times tables and things like that. So that has a certain specific set of steps that will be tested. So a teacher that could say, you know, this is how we traditionally did math. You may find this the easiest way to do it. not only do you have to follow the prescribed steps, but you also, in this new set of math standards, describe how you arrived at that answer. So it's not just math, it's writing skills come into play here also, where you have to describe how you arrived at your answer. You can't just provide the answer, you have to explain it as well. And that has repercussions for English language learners, some students with other disabilities that
Sure.
may not be able to, they may be able to master the math without a problem, but explaining it is
Can
not
I
as
ask
easy.
you this, because I was a special education teacher, is it just that one program that teachers have to use? That one way of teaching, or are there many ways? I mean, are they allowed, so students need to learn multiplication.
Yep.
And there are a lot of different ways that kids can get at multiplication. There really are.
Yes.
If you're,
Yep.
I mean, I was a special education teacher. One size doesn't fit all.
Yep.
Are you telling me that teachers have to teach it one way, or can they?
I am, because what happens is the way that this math is understood by the students has to be demonstrated on the assessments. So when these assessments are handed out to the students, they have to show those steps to be able to pass that assessment. And so because these assessments are then tied to teacher performance, a teacher that dares teach it in a different way may be penalized in their evaluations.
Okay.
So it makes it very difficult to venture off and teach in a different
And to bring
way.
in more creative ways.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, well, we're going to take a break there, and we'll be back in just a few minutes after. You got to be kidding me.
The ladies of the Rhode Island Senate have proven once again that the hasty pursuit of political correctness will be quickly unmasked as spin rather than statecraft. Are you kidding me? Senate Bill 721 revises the language of a law that has long been on the books, entitled Relating to Labor and Labor Relations, Wage Discrimination Based on Sex Prohibited. With that lofty-sounding and rather obvious prohibition, the bill goes on to stipulate that women may not be paid less than men for performing the same task. Then it immediately provides exemptions from the prohibition for just about anything. It exempts seniority, experience, training, skill, or ability, duties and services performed either regularly or occasionally, the shift or time of day worked, availability for other operations, or any bona fide factor other than sex as determined by the employer. Senators Golden, Pivaweed, Goodwin, Lynch, and Sosnowski must have put their bill-writing pens down with a great sense of self-satisfaction. With the aforementioned loopholes, it would seem that this bill has no teeth whatsoever when it comes to protecting women from wage discrimination based on sex. By a quirk of Section 28-6-18B, however, it will now be perfectly legal to pay men less than women for the same job. So much for wage discrimination based on sex being prohibited. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. We're sitting here with Donison Allen, who is a very concerned parent, and you've studied Common Core standards quite a bit, or the whole Common Core package. This is a package of the 4 components that you mentioned before that is being imposed upon our schools at this point, and there's just a lot of controversy about it. During the break, you showed me some information about who actually wrote Common Core.
Yeah.
And I'd wonder if you could share that with our viewers. It doesn't appear that they were written by teachers.
Essentially, that is correct. Unfortunately, what we see is that under the direction of the National Governors Association, the Council for Chief State School Officers, and a company called Achieve, they put together a committee to write these standards. The members of that committee were primarily representatives of testing companies.
Not a good matchup when you want kids learning, but
No, I don't think so at all. In math, the math standards had 3 people who had taught math before, out of the 15 or 17 in that group, and none of them had taught from K through 8. So they were slated with being responsible for developing math standards for children that they had never actually had the opportunity to teach before.
All right, so it was vendors who were helping to write the Common Core standards. Only 3 teachers, and do you know, they had been in a classroom, but were they in elementary school, middle school, high school, college? Do you know?
Well, there is some limited information, and I can get that for you. Maybe I can share it after the break. You know, who those people were. I have the names and their qualifications to actually show you, where they're from. So.
Well, but it's never good to allow a vendor to develop the program because they're selling a product, right?
That's right.
They're selling a product, and you really need an independent look at what the standards should be. Okay, so let's go on. Maybe we can get a little bit more information about that. But I'm reading some of this. This was from, I guess, from an elementary school. Well, I guess they're talking about kindergartners.
Yeah.
And some of the standards require for 5-year-olds that they are able to write upper and lowercase levels and read at sufficient accuracy and fluency to support comprehension. That's a big mouthful for us, let alone a 5-year-old. You said that there was there's an Alliance for Childhood that has kind of pushed back on the standards.
Yeah, this document was written and signed by 400 early educational specialists. So they early on knew that these standards were inappropriate for younger children. So they were out in the front in writing this document to let people know that these standards are not what younger children should be required to know at those ages. And to take it one step back, just to revisit the standards writers for a moment, Dr. Sandra Stotsky, who wrote the English language arts standards for Massachusetts.
Okay. Massachusetts used to be #1 in the country.
Correct. So she's I would say, the utmost authority on what good standards look like.
She knows her stuff.
Yes. She attested to, and when we talk about standard writing, we talk about 2 things. One is the standards themselves, and the other is the process by which these standards were written. That lack of transparency that took place says a lot, because in Massachusetts, they took 10 years to develop these standards. So it's a combination of them writing the standards, having it reviewed by parents and teachers and administrators, and then putting it back in for revision. And that was a 10-year process.
Yep, back and forth until you got it just right.
Until you get it just right. So you take all those components of what they achieved, and you would think that that would be a perfect model for others to emulate, which, again, the federal dollar came down in 2009, and it was more important to Massachusetts to receive their stimulus money than it was to maintain those standards. So, I mean, to dovetail that back to what you were talking about.
Well, let me just say for our viewers, I actually read an article recently. Massachusetts used to be #1 in the country for educational performance of its students. I mean, it was knocking it out of the park, yes. Right? Just something that every state should be emulating what happened in Massachusetts. And they have now adopted the Common Core standards. And my understanding, and again, I haven't studied it, but their performance is starting to fall. And that's real concern, because we should be looking to what they had achieved and getting everybody there instead of getting everybody to a lower level. And I know there's a whole lot more research that goes on there. Maybe it's not attached to the Common Core standards, but we need to find out, because we want excellence. We don't want mediocrity.
Correct. And I think this also ties into how do you define academic excellence, and who's defining it. And if you would ask someone like yourself, what that definition is. It's quite a bit different than someone like Bill Gates, for example, who has donated millions and hundreds of millions of dollars to foster the development of the Common Core standards, to get people on board supporting it in all walks of life. So,
and you know what? And I believe that he's well-meaning in that. I do.
I understand. Right.
But he's not a teacher either.
Right.
And he's not a parent, and he's not been a child for a long time. And when I look at some of these standards that take the joy out of learning, I think you need to put parents and teachers, real teachers, in charge of that process. I believe we need standards. I believe we need to really push for excellence. But having test writers write our standards is probably not the way to do it.
I agree.
But do you have something else to say about Mrs. Stotsky? Is that her name?
Yeah, Sandra Stotsky. In that she served a function on what they set up was a validation committee, which was slated with the task of looking at these standards and validating that they were research-based and that they were rigorous and that they met the criteria that should come with good standards. She and Dr. James Milgram were two of the people on this committee that had the type of classroom and standards writing experience that you would expect a validation committee to have, whereas we see the same types of situations with this committee as we do with the standards writers, in that we didn't have teachers represented in that group.
Or parents.
Or any number of other people that you would think should be there. She and James Milgram refused to sign off on those standards because they were not up to what they would consider good standards. So she's been very outspoken about this. She also said that one of the things that struck her as most bizarre, because she's been in education her entire life, was that in signing up to be part of this validation committee, she had to sign a confidentiality agreement that she would never disclose what was discussed in those meetings. And,
oh, you're kidding.
And for the life of her, she's been in this for her, she's never in a public debate about something as important as education, would you think that you'd have to sign an agreement.
That you can't share how it happened.
Yeah.
Okay, that's a little bit disturbing. Mm-hmm. We're going to take a break right now and we'll be right back.
Tolls for trucks. Are you kidding me? The governor, in her infinite wisdom, has proposed a new way to hit everyone in the state. It's the go-to word for Rhode Island progressives. Tolls. Yes, by now you've heard all about this, but here's something you may not know. This affects every delivery and distribution vehicle at 19 tons, 18-wheelers or 40 tons, that small businesses like liquor distributors use to move product all over the state. And because the state is so small, that means more frequent crossings across the borders, especially into Massachusetts. Cha-ching! So the businesses that have this imposed on them will simply pass the cost on to us, the consumers of these products. Hey, don't toll my beer, man. Oh yeah. Place your bets on how long it'll be before the toll includes everything with wheels. If you think this money will actually go to roads, I have a bridge to sell you. So it's not been a good year in Rhode Island, and we've all grown tired of yielding to the governor's will already. We'll gauge how this goes by how many more leave the state. Eventually, just going to visit your Mo in Master, Connecticut will take its toll on everyone. And no, I don't mean her pot roast. Trucks and for cars too, only not yet. Are you kidding me?
What do I stand for? What do I stand for? Most nights I don't know anymore.
Welcome back. We're sitting here today with Jonathan Allen, who is a very concerned parent from Burrowville who has done a lot of study an investigation of Common Core. Jonathan, we were just talking about the fact that the standards, the Common Core standards, were developed by vendors with very little input from teachers. I know that one of the parts of the Common Core curriculum, I guess is what you call it, or the program, is that it requires a longitudinal data system.
Correct.
Talk about that in terms of the fact that we used vendors.
I think it ties in completely, because anyone who understands the value of data can understand and appreciate why they would want to have access to student information. It helps them develop curriculum, develop tests, and it's also a tool for marketing as well. And
so is it just that they get the test scores, or is it more than that?
No, and the reason why this has become a big concern is after we signed our agreement in 2009 to agree to these standards and the data system and assessments and so forth, in 2011, the Obama administration, through regulatory action, changed the definition of educational interest. So the Family Education Rights and Privacy Act, which was, I believe, 1972, has always provided a backstop for parents to have control over their children's information and who would have access to it. Traditionally, an educational interest would include teachers, superintendents, school committees, the Rhode Island Department of Education would have access to that personal information from students.
Yeah, I was a special education teacher, so I can tell you it used to be very considered very confidential information. You weren't allowed to share anything about your students with anybody.
Yes.
Except their parents.
That's right. And so anything beyond that, you'd have to get the parents' permission to share with another organization. In 2011, what they did is redefine who has an educational interest. And now that includes outside vendors and curriculum development companies and researchers. It even expands it to other government agencies, the federal government. There's now a whole host of law enforcement which now can gain access to, by law, without parental consent, personally identifiable information. And to take that a step further.
Personally identifiable.
Correct. Right. So it says right in it, personally identifiable information.
Not just this item, this many yeses, this many nos on it. It's personally down to the child's level.
That is correct.
Okay.
So it spells it out in the Federal Registry. It's page 75,606. You can look that up from 2011.
75,206.
It's unfortunate, but yes,
fairly large group of regulations.
It's a large document. So, but included in there is the proof that you can now share this information with outside entities. And one thing you need to be aware of, and everyone should be aware of, is that when any medical information gets included in a student's file, that is no longer protected under the HIPAA laws. This falls under the purview of FERPA because it's a student record. So they're no longer called medical records, they're called health records. And in making that distinction, that information can also be shared with third parties without parental consent. So there's a lot of disturbing pieces of the puzzle going on behind the scenes that I think is an important part of this entire component, because Common Core standards include those four pieces. It's the assessments, it's the data collection, and it's the opening to charter schools, which is another component that we could also maybe talk about as well, because there's some issues with that.
I mean, as far as the data collection, I think test makers should have access to the results of the tests, but not down to the personal level. And it seems like that removes the ability of parents then to protect their children.
Yes.
Right?
I
Which
agree.
is our number one thing that we have to do.
Yes.
One of the things when I heard Common Core was that I thought it was basically minimum standards. One of the things that has always disturbed me about inner city schools, quite frankly, is that students come out of 12 years of education without the ability to read, without the ability to function in a job, right? They're just basically putting in the time, and we're not holding either the students or the teachers accountable for their education. And it's just such a waste of human potential. So when I heard the word Common Core, for me it meant that it was a minimum standards, so that by the time they got to the 12th grade, we knew that they were reading at a certain level, that they were able to perform math and thinking skills, writing at a certain level. You're saying that Common Core does or doesn't fulfill that part of the puzzle. And what's wrong with that?
Well, certainly minimum standards are incredibly important. I agree with that 100%. And Common Core sets these standards to be, in theory, minimum standards. They have a copyright, so they allow up to 15% additional instruction that can be added above and beyond those required standards.
Only 15.
Only 15.
Only 15.
I don't know how you
go
track
to 20,
that.
You're out of line. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know how you track that or keep that that information. But the problem happens when these standards end up being the ceiling, because the way that the system is set up and the way the assessments are set up is that teachers are going to make sure that they get the students up to that level. But there's no incentive there for them to take them to another level.
To push higher.
Right, because you're assessing their effectiveness on how well they brought as many students as they could to that level. So that leaves, and this is documented also in Sandra's information about what happens with standards for the later grades. If you're not teaching Algebra 1 by a certain grade, then you can't get the Algebra 2, the trig, and the calculus, which is essential for STEM careers in college. And so if you push back some of these standards too far, you're supposed to have students that are going to be college and career ready.
Right.
But how are they going to be ready for college in some of those areas if your standards become the ceiling? And Algebra 2 is really where that ceiling is.
If the minimum is actually the ceiling, and that teachers aren't sending them to higher and higher levels. And I know one of your concerns is that with the federal government deciding on the standards and then kind of requiring teachers to teach to those standards and to use the curriculum that they are mandating, that the states and the localities can't add to the standards and make them more relevant to kids. I mean, if you live in Iowa, it's different than living in Rhode Island.
That's true. Very true.
So adjusting curriculum and actually pushing students to higher levels just won't happen, or is less likely to happen under Common Core?
Certainly less likely because of the way that the assessments are designed. One thing that Sandra also points out in her standards is the shift away from literary texts and replacing it with informational texts.
Blech.
And so you lose, no, but you lose the,
I was an English major, so I really love literature.
So I'll let you talk more about that.
I do not like manuals, I can tell you that. But with that, we're going to take another break, and we'll be right back.
Is the cure more effective when it is offered by the same hand that dispenses the malady? Are Rhode Island legislators under any obligation to use logic in crafting new laws? Or are they just kidding all of us? Senate Bill 720 intended to very narrowly define the licensing procedures for sale of any non-tobacco or nicotine product. Senator Miller, the bill's sole sponsor, has succeeded in creating a tangled web of regulation that makes this act more laugh than law. This legal magnum opus requires anyone selling non-tobacco nicotine delivery systems to purchase an annual permit to do so from the state. But wait, there's more. Sellers of these smoking cessation products must also, by law, offer cigarettes at the same location. Selling cigarettes requires yet another annual state license, and that seems to be the only point. In return for the $25 per year per location dip of the beak for the state treasury, Senator Miller eliminates the offices of physicians and caregivers engaged in stop smoking counseling from offering devices or consumables associated with these alternatives. Better yet, the bill effectively prohibits drugstores from dispensing prescription nicotine chewing gum unless they also sell cigarettes. CVS is just the tip of the iceberg in the current move to stop selling cancer sticks at pharmacies. In the blind pursuit of ever more income to squander, our state Senate has allowed this dog loose. Are you kidding me?
Welcome back. We're here talking with Donison Allen, a very concerned parent in Burrillville who has studied Common Core, the program that is being instituted right now in our schools, from kindergarten to job training, you're telling me. Mr. Allen, we were talking about charter schools. And right now, I mean, I'm actually a very big supporter of charter schools because I think they give parents and their children alternatives to public schools. We know that all kids learn differently. They have strengths and weaknesses just like we as adults do. And oftentimes those strengths can be used better in a private school setting, whether it's a parochial school, a charter school, some kind of independent school, that they can learn better there. But you said that the independence of charter schools, their ability to adapt to different children in different environments, can be compromised by the Common Core standards. Can you explain that?
Yeah, it's more than the Common Core standards per se. The Elementary and Secondary Education Act, which is up to be reauthorized now in Washington, D.C.
Okay, this is where No Child Left Behind started, and now it's become this act.
Yeah, it goes even further back than that, but it's manifested itself into No Child Left Behind, and they're coming up with a new name for it now as they reauthorize that.
Okay.
One version of that will change the way that Title I money is delivered to local school districts.
Okay, so Title I money, for those of you who are watching, is the money that the federal government gives to subsidize communities that have numbers of children that are in the poverty level, yes, or at poverty level.
Right. So historically, they've been given to districts in aggregate. So a certain percentage of your student population meets that criteria, you're allotted a certain amount of dollars. The way that this is to be reauthorized is to reassess how that money is provided to the districts. So what they're attempting to do is tie it to the child. So once the federal dollars flow to the town and a child is, a parent says that I'd like them to go to a particular charter school, that student with the Title I money will go to that charter school, and that
which
charter
is a good
school,
opportunity for the child to take advantage of the charter school, that different learning environment.
A different learning environment for them. The parents took the initiative
sure,
to make
to
that
find
choice.
Something better for their child.
The minute that charter school agrees to accept that student, and they'll have to accept the student, they're going to agree to the terms set forth by the Common Core standards because they're accepting the federal money. They're going to have to provide the same standards, the same assessments, so the same requirements will be of this school as the rest of the public schools. So you lose your differentiation.
Yeah, they lose their independence to
Yes.
choose curriculum, to choose content. They're going to have to do just what the public schools are doing, teach to the test.
Right. And if that's the case, then what's the sense of having...
They've lost their specialness.
Yeah. So why would you have two competing entities all teaching the same standards? So it's a huge concern.
And the standards themselves kind of limit teachers so that they can't go above them. They're so full as they are that if they wanted to differentiate or go outside the lines, they don't have the time.
They won't have the time to do it, and it seems like the standards themselves are made more difficult within, and we should have talked about this earlier, but rather than advancing the ideas in math, they'll take a simple math concept and expand it to make it more difficult than it needs to be. And it also ties back to the tests that we've got an issue with, which the tests seem to be poorly designed to test those standards, in that the tests themselves, the questions are designed in a way not to test the child's knowledge, but to make it see if the child can understand the question. They'll make the question difficult rather than just to see if they understand something.
If they have the knowledge, which is what we want. I actually believe in standardized tests. And I understand that this PARCC test or the NECAP may have flaws in it. But in Massachusetts, let's take Massachusetts because they are #1, or were #1, they had a test But they developed it over time, right? I never think that going in the first time you're going to have it perfect, but you find out what the flaws in the test are and you make it better until it matches your student body. And one of the reasons I like standardized tests is because it holds people accountable. It holds students accountable, it holds teachers and administrators accountable, it holds parents accountable. So that we don't end up at the end of the line with kids getting out of high school with no skills and no ability to get a job.
Yeah. Well, I think what they did in Massachusetts is probably the perfect marriage of all of those issues. You know, the teacher licensure tests, you know, having students, you know, take the MCAS as a graduation requirement, but it was done in an open, transparent, 10-year process that made sure that all interested parties were represented. Yeah. And they came up with a package and a solution that, you know, everybody had to give something up. You know.
And that's that local control that you were talking
Yes.
about, letting the state and the municipalities and the parents develop the education. Now, I know from all of your study now, and you weren't necessarily against Common Core when you started, but you are now. You're
100%.
very, very concerned about it.
I am.
And you and a group of parents have formed
Yes.
an organization. You want to tell us about it?
Sure. It's the Stop Common Core Rhode Island. We have a Facebook presence of about maybe 1,500 people that are currently very active. It's a combination of parents, teachers, other citizens that are very concerned about where the our educational system is going. And we've used that as a template and a basis for alerting parents and other community members as to what's taking place, keeping them up to date with news and information, and also giving them notices when there are hearings on bills that are pending and legislation that they may be able to testify on behalf of some of these things to help us rid the Common Core, which is sort of a couple of steps in the process. We've taken steps to undermine this PARCC test.
I know, and talking, I know that you believe in minimum standards. You just don't want those standards becoming the maximum standards.
Yes.
But there is a difficulty, I think. We've taken millions and millions of federal dollars. They always have strings attached to them. What are the chances of us getting out of Common Core?
It's a very difficult process. Our thought process behind this is a step-by-step approach, I think. We're trying to interrupt the system. And what I mean by that is we're having children refuse the test. They don't get the results that they need to hold the teachers accountable and find out if students are learning. So that undermines the concept of the four-legged monster that I call the standards, the data they're collecting. So that's step one. The second step is to try and rid ourselves of Common Core and come up with a solution. But the assessments that go along with it have to work in tandem. So you have to come up with a solution. And no one ever defined what does college and career ready mean. Yeah. You know, what is that? What is the definition of college?
Sounds good.
It sounds great, you know, but is it? I would argue that we have already achieved that in many districts. If you could show what percentage of your students have gone on to get a higher education and what percentage are now following a career path, if that's the definition, many towns are already achieving that. So this new idea about where this is going to go is being dictated by someone other than parents, teachers in our state. So,
well, a lot of states are pushing back now on Common Core. They want out. They've looked at it closer. And the goal always is to make sure that our students reach their full potential and become productive members of society with good lives in front of them. So thank you very much for taking this on. And thank you for coming and sharing with our viewers.
It's all about the kids.
It is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I have been listening with amazement as our Rhode Island leaders propose another way to tax us. Let's help the business climate by taxing large trucks as they carry goods throughout Rhode Island. What a great idea. Let's spend a few $1 million putting up the tolling apparatus so we can actually hose down the trucking industry. Oh, get real. But that's only one of the issues that got my attention this week. My sister, my dear sister, called to ask, for some transportation help as she is off to Tampa Bay from her home on the Cape. She forwarded her ticketing information, so I naturally checked it out for costs. Nosy guy that I am. $263 and change round trip TF Green to Tampa. Not bad on Southwest. No cost to Southwest. Then I looked at the breakdown of the cost. Base cost $216. Now what did the rest, the $47 that's left, pay for? And that would be excise tax 16, segment fee 12, passenger facility charge 9, September 11 security fee of $11.20. That's 22% of the total fee that we have to pay for the privilege of flying around. So that got me started wondering what other privileges we enjoy for our other services. So I looked at our National Grid bill from my house. Oh boy, no wonder my wife never shows me the bills. The bill for March into April was $185 and change for using 972 kWh. I guess that's kilowatt hours. But here's the rub. I paid National Grid $103.43 for the energy. And that included $4.18 for renewable energy. I don't know what the difference there is, but so what did the rest of the payment buy? The delivery services section of the bill says that there is a customer charge of $5. Then I paid for LIHEAP. And what is that, you ask? Well, that's the charge required by Rhode Island law to be used to provide funding to the Low Income Home Energy Assistance Program Enhancement Plan. Got it? Then I paid a distribution energy charge and energy efficiency programs charge. I wonder if that's the one that subsidizes the cheap LED lights at Home Depot. Then the renewable energy distribution charge, that's the one our legislature decreed would be used for acquiring a portion of Rhode Island's energy supply from renewable sources like wind turbines and solar panels. What a great idea. Wish the one in Portsmouth was working. Then we pay a transmission charge, and finally on the bill it said transition charge. Now what in heavens is a transition charge? I had to look that one up. Seems each electric consumer pays this fee to help electric utilities, which are all regulated, pay down stranded costs incurred as a result of the transition from a regulated market to a deregulated market. When is that going to happen? And then there's the gross earnings tax that our legislators created. That would be $4.67 on my bill. When the Public Utilities Commission allowed National Grid a 24% rate hike, Rhode Island took in an additional $5.1 million of new money based on the rate increase. Let me see if I got this right. Rhode Island government took in over $60 million, so last fiscal year, from all of us who use electricity and gas, just to live in our homes and work. Now that would have been 4% for me, but 7% for business, who are not manufacturers. Oh well, where did that money all go? Affordable housing? So now I am on the hunt for another way our legislature has made it affordable for me to be in Rhode Island. I looked at our cable bill. It cost me $198 and change to be able to watch a million channels of nonsense. It's okay to watch common sense, but not the nonsense on TV. So what do I pay the government to watch TV? My bill says I paid a federal excise tax, the schools and library fund tax, the state sales tax, the E911 fee. Then I pay for the FCC access, the Universal Service Fund, the carrier cost recovery fee, state gross receipts tax. You remember that one from the electric bill? Then there is the relay fund, whatever that is. And lastly, the federal universal service charge. Wow. It is abundantly clear to anyone in Rhode Island who pays the bills that any place government can make the cost of living go higher, it does so. And now our government wants more, this time from the truckers. Good luck on that one. Last time I checked, they were Teamsters. All the truckers are in the union. Shouldn't be fooling around with unions in Rhode Island. Thank you for watching, and I apologize for the portion of last year's show that was a result of our editors being asleep at the switch. God bless.